My granddaughter came back inside from checking the garage and she wouldn't look at me. That was the first thing I noticed. She's 22 years old and she's never been able to hide anything from her face. Her mother used to say she got that from me. She stood in the kitchen doorway with her coat still on, keys in her hand, and she said, "Grandma, I need you to pack a bag." I set down my coffee cup. "What?" "Don't call anyone. Just pack what you need for a few days. We have to leave right now." I stared at her. This girl who used to fall asleep on my lap during thunderstorms. Her hands were shaking. "Hazel, what is going on? Please." Her voice cracked on the word. "Please just trust me. I'll explain everything in the car. My name is Edith Calloway. I'm 71 years old, and I'm going to tell you what my granddaughter found in my garage that morning and what it meant and what happened after. But first I need to tell you about the pills. It started 8 months ago. Little things at first. The kind of things you explain away when you're my age, because you've been told your whole life that getting old means your body stops cooperating. I'd wake up with my hands numb. Not the tingling you get when you sleep on an arm wrong. Both hands. Every morning, pins and needles all the way to my wrists. My vision blurred at odd times, usually after dinner. I dropped a casserole dish in November. Just lost my grip on it completely. No warning. And it shattered on the kitchen floor and I stood there looking at the mess and thinking, when did my hands get so unreliable? My husband Gerald would have known something was wrong immediately. He was like that. Noticed things before anyone said a word. But Gerald had been gone for 3 years by then. Heart attack on a Tuesday morning, same as any other Tuesday except that he didn't come in for breakfast, and I found him in the backyard next to the rose bushes he'd been pruning. He was 68. We'd been married 41 years. I still reached for his side of the bed some mornings. My daughter started coming by more often around the time the symptoms started. She'd bring food, casseroles, soup, things I hadn't asked for. She'd say she was worried about me living alone. I thought it was kindness. She's 51 years old and she's lived 20 minutes away her whole adult life. And I'd always thought we were close, the way a mother and daughter can be close, the way you assume means something permanent. Her husband came with her sometimes. He's an anesthesiologist, has been for 20 years. He knows exactly how the body works, how medications interact, how much of something is too much. I didn't think about any of that at the time. My doctor ran blood work in December. She's a young woman. Thorough, the kind who actually reads through your chart before she walks in the room. She frowned at my numbers and asked if I'd changed anything. Diet, medications, supplements. I told her about the vitamins my daughter had started bringing me. She'd said they were high quality, better than what I'd been buying at the pharmacy, tailored for women over 65. My doctor asked me to bring them in. Before I could, my daughter picked them up one afternoon while I was at a neighbor's house. She said she'd noticed the bottle was almost empty, and she wanted to replace them. She brought back a new bottle, same label, same brand. I didn't think anything of it. The next blood work was worse. I'd lost 11 pounds since September. I hadn't been trying to. My doctor started talking about further testing, specialist referrals. She was careful about how she said it, but I could read the concern underneath. I went home and sat in Gerald's chair and thought about what it would mean if something was actually wrong with me. My son-in-law stopped by that evening, just to check on me, he said. He sat across from me with his hands folded and his face arranged in the expression he wears at family funerals. Careful, compassionate, practiced. He talked about my age, about how these things sometimes happen, about how it was good that I had family nearby who could help make decisions if things progressed. I remember thinking the word decisions sat oddly in that sentence. Hazel started coming by on her own around that time. She's my daughter's youngest, the only one of my 3 grandchildren who calls just to talk, not because there's a reason. She was finishing her nursing degree, and she'd drive over on her days off and we'd sit at the kitchen table the way we always had, and she'd ask me how I was feeling, not the way people ask when they don't actually want to know. The way she asked meant she was listening to the answer. In January, she asked about my vitamins. She picked up the bottle, turned it over, read the label. She was quiet for a moment. "Grandma, have you been taking these every day? Your mother brings them every month. She says they're important for my age." Hazel set the bottle down. She didn't say anything else about it that afternoon, but she looked at it again before she left. and her face did the thing it does when she's working something out. 2 weeks later, she called me on a Wednesday morning and asked if she could come over. She arrived an hour later, and she went straight to the kitchen cabinet where I kept the vitamins. She took the bottle to the table and sat down. "I had these tested," she said. I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "There's a lab at school. I asked a friend. It took a few weeks." She held the bottle in both hands. "These aren't what the label says they are. There's something in here that shouldn't be in a vitamin supplement. A compound that over time, at the levels you've been taking, would cause exactly what you've been experiencing: the numbness, the weight loss, the vision problems." I didn't understand at first, and then I did, and I wished I hadn't. "Your father gave those to me," I said. "Your mother brought them." "I know, Hazel, I know." Her eyes were bright and she blinked and looked at the table. "I've been going over it for 2 weeks, trying to think of another explanation. But Dad's the one who would know what compound to use. He would know the dosage. He would know how long it would take and what the symptoms would look like." She looked up at me. "And Mom would know your schedule. She'd know when to swap the bottles. She'd know what excuses to make." I sat very still. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car went by on the street. "The house," I said. Gerald and I had bought this house in 1987. A ranch on a corner lot in a neighborhood that had grown up around it. Young families now. Starter homes selling for prices that would have seemed impossible when we were young. 3 years ago, shortly after Gerald died, the house across the street sold for $480,000. This house, according to the appraiser my attorney brought in for the estate review, was worth approximately $520,000. Gerald had paid off the mortgage in 2009. I owned it free and clear. When I die, everything goes to my daughter. She's the only surviving child. Her brother died 15 years ago. Her share of my estate would be the house and the savings, just over $600,000 total. "They're drowning," Hazel said quietly. "Dad's practice got hit with a malpractice judgment last year. I don't know the whole amount, but it's significant. I overheard them fighting about it in September, and Mom, her catering business hasn't recovered since COVID. She had to let all her staff go. She's running it herself and barely breaking even." She paused. "They refinanced their house twice. The second time was in October." I had not known any of this. My daughter called every Sunday. She came by with food and vitamins and hugs, and she never mentioned money, not once. Why didn't she just ask me? My voice sounded strange to me. Thin. If they were in trouble, why didn't she just ask? Hazel didn't answer. She didn't have a good answer for that because there wasn't one. I looked at the bottle on the table. My daughter's hands had touched that bottle. My son-in-law had calculated the dosage inside it, how long it would take, what it would look like from the outside. My doctor frowned at numbers that didn't make sense, and they were both counting on her never making the connection. "We need to go," Hazel said. "I have the bottle. I have the lab report. But if they find out I went to the lab, if Mom figures out I'd been asking questions." She stopped. "I don't know what they'd do. I don't want to find out." She drove. I sat in the passenger seat with my purse on my lap and watched my neighborhood disappear in the side mirror. Gerald had planted the oak tree in the front yard the year my son was born. It was 33 years old. Still standing when we turned the corner. My cell phone rang before we'd gone 5 miles. My daughter's name on the screen. Then again. Then my son-in-law's number. "Don't answer," Hazel said. I didn't. She drove us 40 minutes north to a motel off the interstate. The kind with exterior corridors and a parking lot full of trucks. She paid cash, got a room on the ground floor. Inside, it smelled like cigarettes that someone had tried to cover with bleach. I sat on the edge of the bed and she sat in the chair across from me and we looked at each other. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Okay. When did you first suspect?" She was quiet for a moment. "Thanksgiving. You dropped your fork and laughed it off and called it clumsiness. But you're not clumsy. You never have been. And the week before, when I stopped by, I noticed the vitamin bottle was different from the one you'd shown me in October. Same brand, same label. But the bottle itself was slightly different." I almost said something. I told myself I was being paranoid. "But you kept thinking about it." I couldn't stop. I looked at my hands in my lap, 11 pounds lighter than I was 8 months ago. My own daughter had watched it happen and brought more vitamins. What do we do now? I asked. I've already made copies of the lab report, digital and paper. I emailed them to myself and to a friend who doesn't know what's in them, just holding them for me. She pulled out her phone, and I took photos of the original bottle before I had it tested, timestamps, everything. She looked at me. I wasn't going to come to you without something solid. I knew you'd want to believe I was wrong. She was right. I had been hoping she was wrong right up until this moment. The police, I said. We go to the police. That was my next thought. But Grandma, she hesitated. If we walk into a police station and say my father, the anesthesiologist, has been poisoning my grandmother's vitamins, the first thing they're going to need is evidence that can hold up. The lab report helps. The bottle helps. But they're going to want more. They're going to look at that house, at the financial motive. It'll take time. What do you mean, take time? I mean they'll start an investigation. And once they do, Mom and Dad are going to know. And I don't know. She stopped. Say it. I don't know what they'd do if they thought they were about to be caught. I don't know how far they've already gone. I don't know if they'd try to make it look like something happened to you before anyone could look too closely. She met my eyes. Dad knows exactly how these things work. He works with anesthesia every day. He knows about dosages and timing and what leaves a trace and what doesn't. The room was very quiet. Somewhere down the corridor, a television played. My son-in-law had held my hand at Gerald's funeral. He'd said, "He was such a good man, Edith. I'm so sorry." And I'd believed him, because that's what you do when someone says words like that. You believe them. My phone rang again. I looked at the screen. My daughter, again. 7 missed calls now. I turned the phone over, face down on the bedside table. She knows we're gone, I said. She knows something changed. Hazel was at the window, looking out through the gap in the curtains. She'll start calling places. She might try to track your phone. I should have thought of that earlier. She turned back. We need to move. Not far. Just somewhere she won't find us quickly. We need enough time. Time for what? To do this right. She sat back down. I know a detective. She spoke to my forensic nursing class in the fall. She gave us her card. I've had it in my wallet ever since. She paused. I think I kept it because some part of me already knew something was wrong. She called that night, Detective Yvonne Price, Elder Abuse and Financial Crimes Unit. Hazel laid out everything, the lab report, the photos, the financial background, the timeline. I could hear the detective's questions through the phone, crisp and focused. We need you to come in tomorrow morning, she said. Bring everything. We drove to a different motel. Hazel paid cash again, different name on the register. We pushed a chair against the door that night even though the deadbolt was on. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark and thought about 41 years of Sundays with my daughter. Birthday parties in the backyard. The afternoon she called me from the hospital when her youngest was born. And she was crying and I was crying and she said, "Mom, she looks just like you." I thought about my son-in-law teaching her children to ride bikes in this same driveway I'd taught her in. 30 years between the two memories and the same street, the same oak tree. I thought about the vitamins she brought every month, and whether she'd felt anything handing them to me, or whether she'd stopped feeling things about it somewhere along the way. In the morning, Hazel drove us to the precinct. Detective Price was a small, direct woman who listened without interrupting and asked questions that told me she'd already thought of most of it before we got to it. She looked at the lab report for a long time. "This compound," she said. "Where did your son-in-law do his residency?" "Johns Hopkins," I said, "and then a fellowship, neuropharmacology." She looked up at me. "He would know exactly what this would do." "Yes, and he would know how long it would take." "Yes." She set the report down on the desk. "Mrs. Calloway, I'm going to need you to go somewhere that isn't on record. Not a motel, not a family member's house. Is there anyone you trust completely, someone who isn't connected to your daughter?" There was one person, my friend Paulette, who I'd known since the 1980s, who lived in a different county and had no reason to be on anyone's radar. I called her from the precinct while Hazel talked to the detective. Paulette said, "You come right now. Don't explain anything else on the phone, just come." We went. I spent 4 days at Paulette's house while Detective Price built the case. Paulette asked me 3 times what was happening, and all 3 times I said I couldn't say yet. and she made me tea and didn't push. That's the kind of friend she is. On the fourth day, Hazel called. They'd executed the search warrant on my daughter's house. They'd found a notebook in my son-in-law's home office, handwritten in a locked drawer, pages of notes, dosage calculations, a projected timeline, the words gradual presentation, consistent with natural aging decline. Query vitamin deficiency overlap appeared on the second page in his neat physician's handwriting. They'd also found my daughter's search history on her laptop. How long does it take for a property to transfer after death? Estate attorneys specializing in single heir cases. Average life expectancy women 71 cardiac history. I had no cardiac history. She'd been searching for one that could be created if needed. They were arrested at their house on a Thursday afternoon. My daughter was in the kitchen when the officers arrived. My son-in-law was in his home office, the door closed. He came out when they knocked, and he looked at the two officers in his foyer, and his face went very still, the way faces do when someone has rehearsed the moment in their head, but still can't quite believe it arrived. Detective Price called me after. Mrs. Calloway, they're in custody. Both of them. I sat at Paulette's kitchen table with the phone pressed to my ear, and I didn't say anything for a moment. Paulette put her hand on my arm. What happens now? I asked. We process the evidence. They'll be arraigned in the morning. Given the documentation, the lab results, the notebook. She paused. They'll be advised to get attorneys immediately. This is a serious case. Attempted murder through systematic poisoning of a vulnerable adult. Your son-in-law's medical knowledge makes it premeditated in a way that's hard to argue around, the notebook especially. I heard myself say, he wrote it all down. People do, she said, not unkindly. They plan something this carefully, and they need to track it. They think no one will ever look in the drawer. I thanked her and sat at the table for a long time after. The afternoon light came through Paulette's kitchen curtains and made a stripe across the tablecloth. I looked at it and tried to figure out what I was feeling and found that I couldn't. Hazel came to pick me up 2 days later. She drove me back to my house. The forensics team had been through it. I could tell from the small things, the slight wrongness of furniture that had been moved and set back. They'd gone through the garage, through the bathroom cabinets, through everything. They'd found a second bottle in the garage, hidden behind a shelf of Gerald's old paint cans, a bottle with my name written on a piece of masking tape in my daughter's handwriting. Higher concentration of the same compound. My son-in-law had been preparing the next stage. I stood in my kitchen and looked at Gerald's cabinets, the ones he'd built from pine and installed himself the summer we moved in. He'd said, "These'll outlast both of us." He was right about half of it. Hazel stood next to me. She didn't try to fill the quiet. She's good at that. Why didn't she just ask me? I said again. The same question. I couldn't stop coming back to it. Hazel was quiet for a moment. I think she thought you'd say no, or that it would be embarrassing, or that Dad didn't want to look weak in front of you. She paused. I don't know, Grandma. I've thought about it a lot, and I still don't have a good answer. If she had asked, I would have helped her. That's her inheritance eventually anyway, if they were that desperate. She didn't ask. No. We stood in the kitchen for a while longer. Then I put the kettle on, and we sat at the table the way we always had. And I told her about the first time I'd seen Gerald build something, the summer before we got married. A bookshelf in his parents' house that he'd made from scratch because he couldn't find one the right size. I'd watched him work for an afternoon, and I'd known something then, not that I'd marry him, but that I trusted him. That was the word I kept coming back to. Trusted. The case took 8 months. My daughter and her husband both had attorneys who argued various things. The notebook was personal and inadmissible. The lab results were inconclusive. My symptoms could have other explanations. None of it held. The evidence was careful because Hazel had been careful long before anyone else knew to be. My son-in-law pled guilty 4 months before trial. He received 12 years. My daughter went to trial. Sat at the defense table for 3 days and watched the prosecutor lay out every text message, every search, every carefully scheduled visit with vitamins in hand. She looked at me once, on the second day, and I held her gaze and didn't look away. She received 8 years. At sentencing, the judge asked if I wanted to address the court. I stood and walked to the microphone, and the room was very quiet. I said that I had built a life with Gerald for 41 years, and that the house we'd shared, the things we'd accumulated, the savings we'd kept, none of it was the point of the life. The point was what you did with the time. I said that my daughter had apparently decided the time wasn't worth the effort and the money was worth more than my years, and I couldn't explain that to you because I'd raised her to know better. I looked at her when I said that. She looked at the table. I said that my granddaughter had saved my life using the education she'd worked for herself, and the instinct she'd always had, and the relationship she'd maintained with me because she actually wanted to, not because of what she'd inherit. That distinction, I said, is the whole thing. That's the whole of it right there. I sat down. The judge thanked me. The guards took my daughter out of the room. I watched her go and thought about the phone calls every Sunday. I thought about the casseroles. I thought about her handing me a bottle of vitamins and saying, "These are good for you, Mom, the best kind," and smiling. I thought I'd cry more than I did. But mostly I felt something emptier than sadness. A space where something used to be. 6 months after sentencing, I sold the house. $540,000, slightly more than the appraisal because the market had moved. I couldn't live there anymore. The rooms were full of Gerald and full of the other thing now, and the two of them together were too much. Hazel helped me find a condominium in a 55-plus community 20 minutes from where she lived. Ground floor, good light, a small patio with room for a container garden. I brought Gerald's cabinets. Hazel helped me carry them in, and she spent a Saturday morning installing them in the kitchen, level and precise, exactly right. When she finished, she stepped back and looked at them the way you look at something you've done well. "Grandpa would approve," she said. "Yes," I said. "He would." She came for dinner the following Thursday and the Thursday after that. She started bringing someone, a young man named Davis who worked in home construction and had the kind of hands that knew what to do with things. He looked at Gerald's cabinets the first time he came over and asked who'd built them. I told him Gerald had. He ran his fingers along the joints and nodded slowly. "Good work," he said. "Yes," I said. "It was." I went to therapy, talked about betrayal, and about the particular grief of losing someone who is still alive. My therapist said that second kind of loss is often harder than death because you can't close it. I thought she was right. I take a walk every morning around the complex. There's a path that goes along a small creek, and in the spring, the redbuds bloom along the bank, and they're the same color they were in the yard I shared with Gerald for 35 years. Some mornings I stand by the water for a little while and think about things. Not sad things usually, just ordinary things. The way time moves, the way some things last. Hazel calls twice a week. She passed her licensing exam in March. She works in a geriatric unit now, the kind of work that suits her exactly, and she told me she thinks about what happened with me when she's with her patients, when she's checking their medications and watching their families and noticing the things they can't say out loud. She said she wants to notice. I told her I was proud of her. She said Grandpa would be too, and he would. I know that as well as I know anything. Gerald would have sat in this kitchen and looked at those cabinets and looked at her and felt exactly what I feel when I think about everything she risked to do the right thing. That feeling doesn't have a clean name. It's bigger than pride and quieter than love, and it's the thing that makes you believe the time was worth it after all. Some mornings I still reach for his side of the bed. The sheets are cold and smooth and undisturbed, but I wake up. And that's the thing about waking up. It means you have the morning, you have the light coming in, and the coffee and the walk along the creek, and the phone call on Thursday, and the cabinets glowing gold in the afternoon sun. It means you still have time. I keep thinking about the bottle. The label was the same. The brand was the same. My daughter's fingerprints were on it. And I had been taking it every single day because she handed it to me with a smile and said it was good for me. That's the part that stays with me. Not the betrayal itself, as enormous as it was, but how ordinary the delivery was. How completely I believed it. Because I'd raised her, and I thought that meant I knew what kind of person she was. I thought love in one direction guaranteed something in return. It doesn't. That's not how it works, and I know that now in a way I can't unknow. What saved my life wasn't luck. It was Hazel noticing a thing most people would have let go. A bottle that looked almost the same as the one before it. Almost. She noticed, and she didn't talk herself out of it. She sat with that discomfort for 2 weeks, turned it over quietly in her mind, and then she did something about it, not impulsively, but carefully. She had the bottle tested before she said a word to me. She made copies of everything before we walked into that motel room. She kept the evidence safe before she made the call. That kind of thinking, that steadiness under pressure, isn't something that appears out of nowhere. It came from the years she'd spent training herself to see clearly and act on what she saw, even when the easier thing was to look away. I've thought a lot about my son-in-law, about what it takes to plan something so methodical against someone who called you family. He had the knowledge, he had the technical skill to do what he did and make it look like nothing. But somewhere along the way, whatever understanding he'd had of right and wrong had gotten subordinated to desperation, and then to justification, and then to Ashton tea. That's how it goes when a person stops asking themselves the harder question. Not, can I do this? But what kind of person does this make me? He stopped asking. And the planning got meticulous because the conscience had already been overridden. My daughter stopped asking too. She drove to my house every month and looked at me across the kitchen table and said the vitamins were helping. She watched me lose weight and kept driving over. What does it take to do that? I think it takes convincing yourself that what's happening isn't quite what it is. That you're doing the difficult thing, not the wrong thing. That the math works out somehow. It doesn't. The math never works out when you've taken integrity off the table. Gerald used to say that character is just what you do when no one's watching. He said it about carpentry, about whether you finish the back of a cabinet the same as the front, even though no one would ever see it. But he meant it about everything. He meant it about the small daily choices that accumulate into who you actually are, not who you say you are. Hazel is who she is because she kept asking herself the harder questions. She had the courage to look at something uncomfortable and follow it all the way down instead of finding a reason to step back. That courage, the kind that doesn't flinch from what's true even when the truth costs something, is what the years she spent studying and practicing and paying attention built in her. It doesn't come from talent. It comes from choosing over and over to be the person who does the right thing even when it's hard. I'm still here because she chose that. And I think about that every morning when the light comes through the kitchen window and hits Gerald's cabinets and makes the wood glow warm and gold. I'm still here, and so is everything that matters.